Hey, it's Noah, and this is the 9 billionth time I have recorded this audio, so let's hope I get it right. Alright, we're going to talk about muzzle burn today. So, muzzle burn is the discoloration of metal because of heat on the barrel of a weapon. So you see this on, you can even see it on like exhaust mufflers, those kind of things, and it can be portrayed a bunch of different ways. You'll see it done with just kind of black over the barrel. You can see it as a color transition. I personally prefer the very vibrant color transition. I think it's more cinematic. And I think that's kind of the point. This idea of all these little details adding to a sense of completeness to a project, whether it's army or diorama or a single model, happens to be, the idea is if you have a flat model, once you start adding all these different details, battle damage, muzzle burn, glowing lenses, a detailed base, it starts to tell a story beyond just, hey, that's a well-painted model, to that's a model with character, that has a story, a background, a history. And ultimately, no matter what kind of part of the hobby you're in, it's super cool to see a cinematic situation, whether that's just in a static like display of a model, or it's like a game of Warhammer where two well-painted armies are going at it, and there's this kind of sense of life with all these additional details added to the model. Right, you have a weapon, now you have a weapon that looks super hot, like it's been firing for a long time and it's gotten really hot, and it creates this story that the person observing the model can see, but also these additional colors, little details draw the eye. Ultimately, a well-painted model, a cool-looking hobby project is a combination of the execution of skill as well as interest. If something isn't interesting, it doesn't matter how well it's executed, it really won't be paid any attention to. So there has to be things that draw the eye, that generate interest, as well as trying to execute well. Me not being like a fantastic painter myself, I try to find techniques I can learn, get to a high level execution simply, that add a lot of interest to a model. And I think muzzle burn is one of them. So if we look at, got our thermal lance and our conflagration cannon, you can see we've got these transition of colors going from silver to blue to purple to red, and I add a little bit of yellow and then into bronze. So we're going to use translucent paints primarily for this. Translucent paints over a very bright metallic give a sense of vibrancy and that kind of sense of warmth and heat. So we're going to first paint our barrel in whatever normal color it's going to be. For me this time we're going to use gunmetal from Game Color. Then we're going to find the area of the weapon that we're going to have discolored from heat. We're going to paint that piece with a rough dry brush of a very bright silver color like Runefang silver or Runefang steel. Then from there we're going to layer transitions of translucent paints like inks, washes, or contrasts across the barrel so that the silver, the brightness kind of shines through, tinted by the color of the paint that's over the component, and the overlapping translucent paints at the transition point will create kind of a natural blend without us having to do a bunch of work to blend it. You can do this technique either across a whole army doing one step at a time, or you can really do this in one sitting without taking a lot of breaks for dry times. You just have to be a little bit careful about where those paints touch, and you might have to touch it up a little bit. In this case, we're going to go roll right through. So the paints that we're going to use for this, that gunmetal, so the Runefang silver, we're going to use the blue army ink from Vallejo. We're going to use red Amsterdam ink because that's what I had. We're going to use a little bit of Nasrag yellow contrast paint because it creates a really cool smooth transition into the copper. And then we're going to use, for our copper color, we're going to use Brassy Brass from Game Color. This is one of my favorite metallics. Sweet. So we're going to clear the workbench here and get right on to our example, which we're going to use a rapid fire battle cannon from Imperial Knights from Warhammer 40,000. So the reason I picked this because it's a big, easy to see example with a long barrel. It'd be really easy for us to execute this. And it's a weapon that's supposed to fire at like a high rate of fire anyway, using these giant missile-sized shells. So it really adds to the feel, the story we're trying to tell. So we're going to get just a little bit of the blue ink on our brush. We don't want it to go on super thick. Obviously, you can do it to whatever intensity you want. I like it to really show a lot of the silver through, but still have a smooth coverage of the blue. I'm going to end up doing a little more than I would intend to. And you see when I dropped it down off of this thing, I cleared a little off with my thumb. I'm still going to end up doing a little more than I intended to, and then I'll pop it back off and take off some of my thumb. The video cut out for a sec here, so what you missed was I took the red Amsterdam ink and the blue ink, mixed it on the palette, and got us this purple ink. Then I started adding that over kind of the rim, the end of the blue, to create a transition from the blue into the purple. Add a little bit more to kind of intensify that kind of purple color. Now we're going to move into the red ink. So at first, when we add it at the end, it's still going to be a little bit pink, and that's okay because it's going to create a transition that I ended up really liking. If this is a problem, just use a fresh brush or clean your brush really thoroughly. I kind of like the chaotic colors I get from the blends, and also using the previous color that'd be transitioning in. So I kind of like having a little bit of randomness, but that's because I'm chaos incarnate. But you don't have to follow along with that. To get those really smooth transitions or differentiations in color, just clean your brush really well and grab a different brush when you switch over to the next ink. So the next step on our adventure here, once we get the purple on and we then start to do the red, it'll look a little pink at first, and then we'll go back and we'll add a little more until we get to the kind of the color and vibrancy of the red that we're looking for. That color and vibrancy, once we get there, see I'm working it across on the palette a little bit, going back and just touching it on with this this kind of makeup brush. It is just a makeup brush, which I find the best for some of these like wide applications. It lets you do a minimal number of strokes because you have to rotate the barrel to get it all the way around. So you get less kind of like fussing with the color, and you can just do one stroke at a time on each side and get a really good coverage and size. You might have to knock it back a little bit if it ends up being too thick in the band. So now we're moving over to Nazarag Yellow to create the transition out of the red and into the Brassy Brass Copper. I know it's not really copper, it's brass, but it's in my head that color is copper. So we're adding this Nazarag Yellow. We're going to have it go a little longer than you'll actually end up seeing it, like it's going to tail a little bit. And that's just to add to the transition. Now we're going to grab Brassy Brass, which is my favorite of these paints. And we're just going to get a little bit on the end of the brush, and we're going to do a dry brush, and we're going to start with kind of like a vertical dry brush so that it's more intense at the top and lighter at the bottom to create what is hopefully a natural sense of cooling from the yellow in through the brass down into the more silver metallic colors. Once we get that to where we want, as far as the vertical strokes, we'll go back and using some horizontal strokes and some stippling and get it to the kind of finished texture and appearance that we want. Make sure that we have a nice transition as well as kind of a taper off at the end for that cooling. And then we go back in a sec. So one thing that we hadn't done yet is we need to add a silver ring to the end where the blue is to create that sense of heat, and also highlights that blue on the tip of the barrel. So once we add that, we're just going to use a little bit of a dry brush of that Runefang silver again, and we're just going to tap the end of it really quick, just like this. It's going to be patting off my brush because key with dry brush is to have a minimal amount of paint on the brush, and I think it's really easy to mess up a job if you have way too much paint on the brush, and then you usually want less because you can add more anyway later. Then we're going to go through and we're going to hit a little bit of that at the end where the copper was, just kind of blend it out a little more to dull out the copper color. And then we're going to go back and grab our gunmetal. Now, once we have a gunmetal, we're going to go to the kind of base color of where the brush is, or where the gunmetal of the normal color of the barrel, and then we're going to brush upwards so that it blends into the warmer parts of the barrel. See me doing a little scraping with my finger. I kind of like to smudge things off with finger ends with painty hands, but I find that the human skin is kind of the perfect oily texture to get the paint off in the right way and also create a little bit of smudging in transition. So I'm a messy dude, that's how it works. So here we got the finished product, we've got this nice transition. I really like that pink red that was created there in the middle, and it creates this sense of heat. There's this animated feel to the weapon that this weapon is hot because it is blasting rounds downrange. There's some additional things we can do that we'll cover in another video where we can add like effects and that kind of thing. So example here is this conflagration cannon was done in a batch, and so because of that you see there it's more of a muted, and because there wasn't a lot of like the wet paints blurring together, it still has a really great look. And so whatever kind of aesthetic you're looking for, you can mess around with the intensity, different colors of paints. You don't have to use these colors, you can use whatever colors you want. The idea is just create a vibrant transition across a really bright surface that'll draw the eye and give a sense of life and animation, of heat or power, whatever happens to be, to this massive, powerful thing, whether it's a weapon or I've used the same effect on like the heated exhaust or grills of some vehicles, those kind of things. And I think this is just another cool detail that adds to that overall perception of completeness in that story we're trying to tell, and can just up level you further. You know, one thing in hobby track, specifically if you're competing in hobby, they look for is this sense of a cohesive army. And this is yet one more little thing that ties it together. And that sense of cohesion is a sense of kind of understanding and feeling like the entire army goes together and has a sense of life to it. Well, I hope this helped. I hope this enriches your hobby. If you need any pointers, drop some comments. If you want to show me how you did it or complain that I did it in a terrible way, I don't claim to be the best painter, but I do really try to find techniques I can execute to a high degree that create interest in my models so that I can have a little more enjoyment myself and provide an experience to others when they're playing against me that's both cinematic and enriching, because at the end of the day it's a hobby and it's about having fun and pushing around a bunch of plastic. And if you're not playing a war game, it's just being creative. So get the most you can out of it and have a good one.